Hello world, I'm Dani Rabago.
Hi, I'm Nate Hall. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Grant, and you're watching Econ 304 News. Our project explores two very different films containing different economic perspectives. The first film, The City of God, originates from a true story of cartels within the slums of Brazil through the 1960s till the 1980s. The beginning of the film shows the harsh life faced by the youth growing up in poverty and how the lack of education and resources forces many of them to a life of crime. Progressing from petty theft to drug trade gives the viewer an insight into the violent existence while part of a cartel.
The four main characters within this film were Lil Zay, Benny, Carrot, and Rocket. Rocket acts as the narrator for the film, never entering the drug business but instead pursuing his dream as a photographer. At first, the drug trade was split into districts and acted largely as an oligopoly. Lil Zay, with the assistance of his partner Benny, was able to kill off most of the competition until the only suppliers in the City of God were Carrot and Lil Zay. Benny was known to keep the peace between the two cartels, while Lil Zay functioned as the group's militant leader.
A spree of violence breaks out between the two cartels after Carrot's failed assassination attempt accidentally kills Benny instead of Lil Zay. This event motivates Lil Zay to fulfill his dream of creating a local monopoly within the city's drug business. Before Benny's death, the City of God had peace between the cartels, making the city a safe haven where civilians did not need to worry about looting, rape, or murder. However, after the death of Benny, two rival cartels lost civil and economic control as more corrupt members were recruited without enforcing a code of ethics. Unfortunately, the cartels had gained so much economic leverage that they were able to pay off the authorities. It wasn't until one last glorious shootout that Lil Zay was killed and his regime was brought to an end. The second film we watched was Charlie Wilson's War. This film came more from the government's perspective, and it also focused on politics within the system. However, there were many economic factors to assess. It recalled the true story of U.S. Congressman Charlie Wilson, who worked to fight against the Soviet invasions in Afghanistan.
Wilson became involved with the CIA Operation Cyclone after visiting a refugee camp and witnessing the extreme helplessness and poverty of the civilians. Their economy was destroyed by the Soviets as their infrastructure was severely damaged by the invasions. Wilson was most affected by the Soviets' use of landmines in disguise of toys, which targeted young children.
The operation was organized to support the Mujahideen in their fight against the Soviets. He was frustrated with the CIA's initiative, or lack thereof, to stop the Soviets and help the destitute Afghans. There was an opportunity cost to realize. Not helping the Afghans would also enable the spread of communism and genocide.
When Wilson returns to the U.S., he uses his political and economic leverage to substantially increase funding for the operation, which supplies the Mujahideen with proper weaponry to defend themselves. Here he helps the U.S. to be effective in applying the economic dynamics in order to help fund the war against the USSR. But at the end of the film, as Wilson seeks support for post-Soviet occupation in Afghanistan, the U.S. government wants to focus on other issues. The U.S. fails to support the economic dynamics the Afghans need in order to recover as an economy, thus pushing them back into poverty and corrupt rule.
When comparing and contrasting these two films, you can see that the stories told come from two vastly different economic perspectives. City of God portrays the life and economics of poverty and how the pressures of poverty push the youth to lives of crime, a result of high income inequality. Many of the youth observe the opportunity cost of living rich and dying young as more valuable than struggling to make a decent living. On the other hand, you have Charlie Wilson's War, which tells the story of Congressman Charlie Wilson, who was compelled to stop the communist USSR from overtaking Afghanistan.
Charlie Wilson's War differs from the City of God in several ways, one of which being the presence of moral hazards. Charlie Wilson was able to generate $1 billion of capital to distribute to the Afghan army in order to fight the USSR. Throughout this funding, Afghanistan had no incentive to create a more stable and productive economy. After the USSR's defeat, the United States cut off funding and refused to subsidize Afghanistan's educational sector, so the economy fell back into instability and corruption. In essence, the U.S. acted as an authority that helped fund the Afghan people, but they fell short when they didn't bother to teach the people how to become economically sustainable. We did not see any similar instances of moral hazards in the City of God. Unlike the Afghans, the characters portrayed in the City of God were self-invested and paid off the police to avoid illegal action.
Another main difference between the movies was the amount of power and influence that the characters had. Charlie Wilson was making economic legislation and decisions that affected the entire world, especially Afghanistan, the Soviet Union, and the U.S. He saw the affected families in the refugee camp in Afghanistan, and his efforts His efforts aim to improve the lives of the whole country. In City of God, the characters are under pressure just to keep themselves alive through the rough times in the slums of Rio de Janeiro. They operate without regard of the government and only try to save their close friends' lives. The two movies provide an interesting contrast between the attempted implementation of an economic system in one developing country and the results of the economic system in another.
This is Grant Jurgensen, signing off.
This is Nate Hall. Thanks for stopping by and have a great day.
This is Dani. Until next time.